Hey, good morning. How are you? So good to see you. Although I can't see you yet, it's going to be great to see you when I do. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how deep stories go, how many levels they play out on. Because there's a lot of focus in my work on storytelling on stage and crafting your story and pulling your story out of you and things like that. But what I don't get to talk about a lot, at least not in the, hey, Joshua, in the casual sort of professional sense, is the importance of understanding the stories you tell yourself. Let's take stage fright as an example, right? Stage fright is a function of, sorry, just plugging my microphone in there. I got a brand new microphone you can see and I forgot about it. Stage fright is a function of the stories we tell ourselves. That's a simplistic, overly general, overly easy example, but here's how it works, right? Stage fright is fundamentally a function or a response to fear of rejection, right? It's fear of embarrassment, which is fear of rejection. It's fear that if you get up there, you won't be approved of. Now, people who have a good, solid inner, we'll call it a compass, good stories they tell themselves, good inner dialogue about how they interact with people and how the world works and where their place in the world is and things like that, are going to be much less prone to being crippled by stage fright, much more likely to interpret it as excitement than someone who, let's say, for example, has been told all their lives that they're, doing the wrong work, they're worthless, whatever it is, these common kind of things that are tragic, but we all know someone who has grown up under these kind of influences. Those are how the stories are set, right? The stories that we tell ourselves are a combination of kind of what was shown to us, taught to us, and told to us when we were small, before we had the ability to discern. Before we had the ability to discern, we were completely sort of like open tablets, and whatever our parents, our siblings, our larger environment told us, we believed. Little by little, we gain autonomy, we grow. Sometimes we question those beliefs, sometimes we don't. We question them with different levels of efficacy and thoroughness. But here's the thing. All of those stories, whatever they wind up being, stay inside of us. And to use the example of stage fright again, this is why some people are so crippled. I should say most people are so crippled by the thought of taking the stage and sharing their story and speaking to crowds. It's because you've had it reinforced to you, aka a story has been told to you, that somewhere in it says or suggests that people won't like you, don't like you, won't approve of you, etc. Right? So that is the deep inner stories. What you call the imposter syndrome, which is also more accurately called the inner dialogue, which, by the way, I struggle with that all the time. That shit still gets me. I have tools and strategies for how to deal with it, but it still shows up. So new level, new devil on that as a kind of a side note, right? It doesn't necessarily go away. We just get more sophisticated at dealing with it, which is why it's not as hard for me to take the stage, because I've gotten more sophisticated at dealing with it. So I've changed that fundamental story. And in my case, that story was pervasive and it was intense. I was taught that there was nothing that I shouldn't even bother trying to fit into the world outside of my doors, right? I was taught that, all kinds of crazy stuff. I won't go too far into the backstory now. But what I can tell you is that it was just downloaded into my psyche, all of these stories, and I took them on faith. You've done that too, for better or for worse. We all do that. It's a developmental phase. When you're young, when you're vulnerable, you trust the stories that you're told. As you hit your teens, you start to sort of craft your own stories for yourself. Usually, unfortunately, they're highly skewed. If you have a teenager, you know what I'm talking about. And oftentimes they are self-destructive. They're limiting, right? Then you get a little older, especially if you do something like as crazy and as foolish as move into the entrepreneurial space or the space of trying to build something from nothing. You have to begin to challenge those stories. So hopefully you're getting a sense of how the inner stories work. Hopefully that's making some sense to you. So now let's fast forward to the desire to tell a great story externally, right? What comes up when we think about this? What comes up when we think about taking the stage and being vulnerable, being real, raw, transparent, what people call authentic, but I don't like that word anymore. I think that its power has been sapped from it. So what happens is all of this old, undealt with, unresolved story stuff comes back to bite you in the ass, right? Make sense? How are we doing so far? If that's good, I guess, Joshua, you might be the only one on the call right now, but if that's good, let me know. Send me some sort of an emoji to let me know that you're jiving with this. This is making sense to you. See, the stories that we live in when we're little, and then the stories we start to tell ourselves, they really do sort of create the boundaries of our reality. Some of us then develop a desire to go past those boundaries. And it's kind of like leaving or entering an atmosphere. It can be rocky. It can be difficult. It's always worth it, though. So now we move to, hey, Patricia. So now we move to this idea that now we've got a sense of our life and that we want to share something with people. We want to take that stage, right? Now we've got a different level of story to craft. But first, we've got to go in and address those parts that are holding us back. So, once we do that, then how do we tell a story? Well, there are things that are universal to the human experience. Just to pick some very popular sort of like, summer blockbuster movie type things. There's adversity and victory. Everyone can relate to that, right? There's love and loss. There's triumph and tragedy. You starting to get what I'm saying? These things are what make every great movie has them. Every great story has them. The hero's journey is another one. And by the way, the hero's journey, let's clarify that too, because in my line of work, it's badly misunderstood. The hero's journey is not just you set out to go become something different, right? The hero's journey is more complex than that, and people often miss that. But Patricia says, oh, please do. So let's talk a little bit about the hero's journey then, because we do want to use that model to craft our story, but we have to attach these ideas. Yes. Okay, I'm going to actually stop here and tell you what Patricia said, because it's super on point with what I'm talking about. She said, I've been trying to make my story my hero's journey, and it's just seemed too simple. Most likely, without reading it, here's the reason for that. The reason for that is that you don't latch on deeply to these comparison tools that we learn with, that we love, and that literature uses all the time. And I'm talking about metaphor, analogy, allegory, things like that, right? Things where you use one example to describe another sensation or experience. A good hero's journey has that. Let's think of what's the Odyssey, Homer's The Odyssey, like the classic hero's journey about, oh God, I'm forgetting all my Greek history, Greek mythology. Who is it that sets out on the Odyssey? It is not Homer himself. It is... drawing a complete blank. But anyway, God, that's... Sorry, guys, I'm drawing a blank on his name. It's bugging me. He goes away from home. Nope, not Hermes. Hermes was the god of speed. So I do have that. The guy who got strapped to the mast, he lashed himself to the mast for the siren song. It's so frustrating. So anyway, if your hero's journey seems too simple, let me get back onto territory I can talk about, since apparently I don't have my Greek mythology under my fingertips at all this morning. If it seems too simple, it's because you're not making it metaphorical enough. You're not making it allegorical enough. You're not using enough simile. And when you use them, you're not connecting to these broader themes of human experience, right? If you're just talking about, in your case, Patricia, Patricia's story told from Patricia as Patricia sees it, Odysseus, thank you. Oh, it feels so good to get that when you can't remember. Awesome, Patricia, thank you. So Odysseus was the one who set out on the journey. And he had to go through all these highly complex and highly metaphorical struggles, such as knowing that they were going to sail their ship through the sirens and knowing that the siren song was irresistible. So what did he have his men do? Lash him to the mast of the ship and stuff his ears full of beeswax so that he couldn't hear. The siren song is a metaphor, right? They're not literally talking about sirens in the water who make ships crash. It's a great metaphor for the distractions of life that can, if they're let, they can steer you down the wrong path and consume all of your time, right? So we need these metaphors that connect to these broad themes of human experience. Hope that's making sense. How are we tracking here? How's that doing? Are you guys with me? Okay, I'm going to assume you're with me. So then when we talk about getting ready to craft the story that you want to share, the hero's journey is only part of it. Now, if you haven't seen my question mark storytelling model, it's in the group here. You can search for it in the group. It's a video where I break down how to really tell your story in a way that powerfully moves people. And the thing is, the trouble is I have 13 story arcs. You can have 13 story arcs, by the way, but they've all got to be within one arc. It's got to be like, think of different staircases that are all helping you get to one higher point, right? Good. Excellent. Go check out the question mark storytelling model. You can go to the group, search videos, and it's in there. And it's just me sitting in front of a big drawing tablet drawing a question mark and talking about it. Can't miss it. It'll give you the best insight as to how to start crafting your story in such a way that it creates meaning for other people. And that's what makes a story great, right? All great stories have this sense within them that even though I didn't go through what you in the story went through, I can relate. And that is down to how we craft those comparisons, those metaphors, analogies, similes, etc. So, trying to get back onto my original track here, let's see if I can circle back and reboot. I'm talking about how the stories play out at different levels. First, we had the internal level and how we get these stories in our head. Then we had the level of like wanting to take the stage. There it is. Thank you, Patricia. Boom. Let's see if we can tag that. There, I'll pin it. It's pinned. I love technology when it works. Then we move to talking about how to share your story, your external story. And really the number one thing that you need to understand, and the number one thing that I teach people and walk people through is how to make these connections, how to build these verbal and conceptual bridges between what Patricia went through and how the rest of us can relate to it. Because if you miss that part about being able to relate to it, then you're just telling a story that no one else can sort of get buy-in with. Hope that makes sense for you. And so the fundamental premise of this live stream is that we can't be better storytellers than the stories that we tell ourselves, right? If you want to be a great storyteller on stage or in your copywriting or just in your business in general or whatever, you've got to be able to see, understand, and rewrite the stories inside of you that are causing static, that are creating emotional roadblocks, etc., to get to that point. So, now that opens up a big question. How the hell do we do that? There are a lot of ways to do that. One really powerful set of tools is to practice 3 things all the time. 1, self-awareness. How do we practice self-awareness? Well, I like a soft touch with that. So I like to practice self-awareness just as, think of it as like an internet security program running, right? It searches for viruses, and it's inside of you. This is all you need to do. Just have some sort of a program running that's just searching you. That's just you're self-referencing. You're examining yourself. That's self-awareness. But be doing it on a regular basis. Always kind of popping one level up and looking at your thoughts, actions, behaviors, and whether or not they jive with who you are and what your values are. 2, courage. This is the part most people screw up. Courage, in this case, means the courage to just lean in when you find parts about yourself that don't serve you anymore, that you're not comfortable with, what have you, right? You want to have the courage to lean in. Just get curious about it. Just feel it. Don't find something about you that maybe no longer serves you or you don't like and feel like you have to eradicate it. It's way too disjointing. It's way too jarring, and it's way too harsh a way to improve ourselves. And it causes tons of backlash, right? We won't be as well served trying to like rip out parts of ourselves that no longer serve us as we will just going, okay, there that is. I see how it makes me act. I see the ways it makes me feel, whatever this thing is, and I'm going to be aware of it. So, and once you start to develop an awareness of it, you can then start to act in accordance with the ways that what you actually value and how you actually want to act. Because as soon as you're aware of it, it no longer is a trap door, right? It's no longer a booby trap. So, self-awareness, courage, and then vulnerability. Hey, Katya, how are you? So, you've got the self-awareness. This is the part where you're searching yourself. You're just running a program in the background that's looking into you and kind of just saying, okay, this is who I am. How does this is what I'm doing. How does it align with who I want to be? Then you've got courage, which is you find the parts that maybe don't align with who you want to be anymore, parts you maybe don't like. I myself used to be an active alcoholic. I used to be a thief. I used to be all kinds of stuff that I am no longer, right? And that I don't like, that doesn't serve me, and that I don't want to share with the world. But that doesn't mean that I try to pull it up by the roots, because I tried that, by the way. I have tried that. And it's brutal, it's hard, it's a fight, and it's a struggle. Instead, become aware of it. Become aware of the way that those things kind of want to affect you and make you act. And then once you've got that awareness, like I said, they're no longer booby traps. They're no longer trap doors. They no longer can surprise you once you're aware of them. And they just, allow me to get new agey here for a minute, they just fold you into the complexity of who you're becoming. Right? Because you're always iterating. You're always evolving. So you just want to fold these things into you and then be able to consciously choose not to act in accordance with them anymore. I hope that makes sense. I don't know how we're doing here, but I think you guys are following me. So the last thing is vulnerability. Not authenticity. Damn it, not authenticity. There's something I have to say about authenticity as we're on this topic. Authenticity is overused. And the thing about words is they're dynamic. Right? If enough people see marketers using authenticity and realize that it starts to mean something different than what it originally meant, guess what happens? It now means something different than what it originally meant. Authenticity does not mean the same thing anymore that it meant 5 years ago. That's just how it is. So I'm not talking about being authentic. Being authentic is a marketing ploy these days, for the most part. Obviously, I'm not speaking in absolutes, but I'm speaking in usable generalities. So, instead, be vulnerable. But don't be gross vulnerable, right? Don't be like the new age person who just always shares their vulnerability without anyone asking. Does that make sense? Right? They're just sort of foisting their soft underbelly on you all the time. That's not the kind of vulnerability I'm suggesting. Don't be at a dinner party where everybody's talking about sports or the news or current events and just launch into some deep internal thing that you feel you need to expose in the name of vulnerability. It's not cool. Nobody likes it. It's insensitive, and it shows a lack of awareness of other people. But on stage or as a speaker, as a communicator, you can learn what's appropriate to share with vulnerability, and share that tastefully, judiciously, and sort of like hot sauce where you don't want too much of it, right? So, self-awareness, courage, vulnerability, these three things, when you connect them with this rewriting of the inner stories, will allow your outer stories to be super, super powerful. And the last thing, like I was sort of going deep with, is for the outer stories to... Got a phone call. Sorry about that. And when I say powerful, what I mean is other people can connect to them. You have to be able to build those symbolic, conceptual, and verbal bridges between the specific things that you've experienced that you want to share and the broader human themes that we can all relate to. That's a lot, I know. Big chunks there. Digest, talk amongst yourselves, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you guys for the participation. I really appreciate it. See you on the next one.